On the day of Texas's grandest wedding, Delaney Ford bolts in her gown, leaving behind wealth, duty, and a groom she never loved. When a stranger in a pickup offers a ride, he unknowingly sets her on a path that will change everything. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The summer sun beat down on Ford Acres as workers scurried around the sprawling ranch house. White roses adorned every surface, and the smell of fresh-cut flowers filled the air. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, Delaney Ford stood in front of a full-length mirror, barely recognizing herself in the elaborate wedding gown her mother had chosen. "Hold still, dear," her mother, Eleanor Ford, instructed as she adjusted the heavy veil. "We need to make sure everything is perfect. The Millers will be watching your every move." Delaney nodded silently, her stomach in knots. At 35, she had spent her entire life following her parents' expectations. As the only daughter of one of the wealthiest agricultural families in Central Texas, her path had always been carefully mapped out. And today, she was about to fulfill her biggest obligation, marrying Blake Miller, heir to another powerful ranching empire. "There," Eleanor said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "You look exactly like a Ford bride should. Your father would be so proud." At the mention of her late father, Delaney felt tears threaten to spill. Robert Ford had been a stern but fair man who built Ford Acres from nothing into a multi-million-dollar operation. He had passed away just 6 months ago, leaving behind enormous shoes to fill. "Mom, Delaney started but was interrupted by a knock at the door. Her cousin Melissa poked her head in. "The photographer wants some pre-ceremony shots, and Mrs. Miller is asking about the seating arrangements again." Eleanor sighed dramatically. "That woman never stops. I'll handle it." She turned to Delaney. "Don't you dare wrinkle that dress. The ceremony starts in 2 hours." As the door closed behind her mother, Delaney finally let out the breath she'd been holding. The room suddenly felt too small, the dress too tight. She opened the window, desperate for fresh air. Outside, the grounds of Ford Acres stretched for miles. Workers were setting up chairs for the 300 guests expected to attend what the local paper had called the wedding of the decade. Everyone who was anyone in Texas agriculture would be there. Delaney's phone buzzed with a text from Blake. "Just making sure you haven't changed your mind. Too late now anyway. See you at the altar." She stared at the message. "No, I love you." No excitement about starting their life together. Just a reminder of their business arrangement, disguised as a marriage. Her eyes fell on a photograph on her dresser, her and her brother James riding horses when they were teenagers. James had always been her protector, the one person who truly understood her. Before his accident 5 years ago, he had pulled her aside at a family gathering. "Lainey," he had said, using the nickname only he called her, "promise me something. When it comes to your life, choose love. Not duty, not family expectations, love." 2 months later, he was gone, killed in a car accident that shattered her world. Now, standing in her wedding dress that felt more like a prison than a celebration, his words echoed in her mind. She glanced at the clock. 1 hour and 45 minutes until she was expected to walk down the aisle. Her heart pounded in her chest. "I can't do this," she whispered to herself, the realization washing over her like a wave. "I just can't." Without allowing herself to think about consequences, Delaney kicked off the uncomfortable heels and grabbed her phone and a small purse. She opened her bedroom door slightly, peering out to make sure the hallway was empty. Then, still in her wedding dress, she snuck down the back stairs and slipped out through the kitchen. "Miss Ford?" one of the catering staff asked in confusion as she hurried past. "Just getting some air," Delaney called over her shoulder, already. Breaking into a run once she hit the back door, she raced across the manicured lawn, then through a field, the heavy dress catching on weeds and getting muddied at the hem. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in months they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. When she reached the back fence of the property, she stopped to catch her breath. The main road was just beyond the tree line. If she could just get there, she could flag down a ride, go somewhere, anywhere but here. As she climbed through the fence, the delicate lace of her dress catching and tearing on the wire, she heard shouting in the distance. Someone had noticed her absence. Her heart hammering, Delaney pushed through the trees and stumbled onto the gravel road. Just as panic began to set in again, she heard the rumble of an engine. A beat-up pickup truck was approaching. Without hesitation, she stepped into the middle of the road and waved her arms frantically. The truck slowed to a stop, and Delaney found herself staring at a man with kind eyes and a surprised expression. "Please," she said, her voice breaking, "can you give me a ride? I need to get away from here." The man looked at her wedding dress, then back at her tear-streaked face. Without asking questions, he reached across and pushed open the passenger door. "Get in," he said simply. Delaney climbed into the truck, gathering her massive dress as best she could. As they drove away from Ford Acres, she caught a glimpse of people running toward the road in her rearview mirror. "Thank you," she whispered, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Name's Rowan," the man said, offering her a bottle of water from a small cooler between the seats. "Rowan Tate." "Delaney Ford," she replied, then winced at giving her real name. "But everyone calls me Delaney," he nodded. "Well, Delaney, I won't ask why you're running from your own wedding. But you're safe now." The simple kindness in his voice nearly made her break down again. She took a sip of water and studied him from the corner of her eye. He looked to be a few years older than her, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and tanned skin that spoke of long days working outdoors. His hands gripping the steering wheel were calloused and strong. "Where are you headed?" she asked. "Home. Got a cabin out near Rust Creek Hollow." He glanced at her. "Where am I?" "Taking you?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't thought that far ahead. I don't know," she admitted. "I don't have anywhere to go." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Well, I've got a spare room. It's nothing fancy, but you're welcome to it for a night or two until you figure things out." Delaney should have been wary of a stranger's offer, but something about Rowan's straightforward manner put her at ease. "I don't want to impose," she said. "It's no imposition. Besides," he added with a small smile, "seems like you could use a friend right now." Friend. The word struck her. She had plenty of acquaintances, business connections, social obligations, but few true friends. "Thank you," she said again, meaning it more than he could know. As they drove deeper into the countryside, away from the manicured estates and toward the more rugged terrain of Rust Creek Hollow, Delaney felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. She checked her phone and wasn't surprised to see dozens of missed calls and messages. She turned it off. "Here," Rowan said, shrugging out of his flannel shirt, revealing a simple white t-shirt underneath. "You look cold." She hadn't realized she was shivering until he mentioned it. Gratefully, she draped the soft flannel over her shoulders, breathing in the scent of pine and something uniquely him. "So," he said after they'd driven in comfortable silence for a while, "what's a Ford doing running away from her own wedding? Your family practically owns half the county." Delaney stiffened. "You know who I am?" Rowan chuckled. "Everyone knows the Fords. I've done some work on your family's properties before. Never met you, though." "What kind of work do you do?" she asked, eager to change the subject. "Whatever needs doing. Fencing, roofing, ranch handwork. I'm good." With my hands. He flexed his fingers on the wheel. "Been saving up to buy back the land my family lost after my dad died. Got a little place now, but I'm aiming for the whole pasture someday." There was no bitterness in his voice, just determination. Delaney found herself admiring his resolve. "That sounds nice," she said softly. "Having a goal like that." He shot her a curious glance. "You saying you don't have goals?" "Oh, I have plenty. Just none of them my own." The honesty in her voice surprised even her. They turned onto a bumpy dirt road, and Delaney got her first glimpse of Rowan's home. The cabin was small but solidly built, with a wide porch and a stone chimney. Beyond it stretched open land dotted with wildflowers and a small barn in the distance. "It's beautiful," she said, and meant it. Rowan looked pleased. "It's a work, in progress." As they pulled up to the cabin, the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. She'd left everything behind. Her family would be furious. The Millers would be humiliated. The scandal would be all over the local news by nightfall. "Having second thoughts?" Rowan asked, seeming to read her mind. "No," Delaney said firmly. "Just wondering what comes next." He turned off the engine and looked at her directly. What comes next is you get some rest, have a hot meal, and breathe. The rest can wait till tomorrow. The simple kindness of his words brought fresh tears to her eyes. When was the last time someone had cared about what she needed rather than what she could provide? Inside, the cabin was modest but neat. A living area with comfortable-looking furniture opened to a small kitchen. A hallway led to what she assumed were bedrooms. "Spare rooms down there on the left," Rowan said, carrying in a small toolbox from his truck. "Bathrooms across the hall. Make yourself at home." He hesitated. "I don't have anything that would fit you, but there's some old clothes of my sister's in the dresser. She stays here sometimes." "Thank you," Delaney said, feeling like she'd said those words more in the last hour than in the past year. "For everything." He nodded, looking a bit uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I'll fix us some dinner later. Nothing fancy, but it'll fill your stomach." Left alone, Delaney explored the small bedroom. It was simple: a bed with a patchwork quilt, a wooden dresser, and a window overlooking the fields. She found a t-shirt, and sweatpants in the dresser, and gratefully changed out of her wedding dress, carefully folding the expensive gown and setting it aside, the symbol of the life she'd just abandoned. In the bathroom, she washed the makeup from her face and removed the pins from her hair, letting it fall in soft waves around her shoulders. The woman in the mirror looked both terrified and relieved. When she emerged, she found Rowan in the kitchen making sandwiches. "Hope turkey's okay," he said, glancing up at her. Something flickered in his eyes when he saw her in normal clothes, her face bare. "You look different." "Good different or bad different?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Just different," he said, but the warmth in his eyes suggested good. "Hungry?" They ate at a small table by the window, the evening light casting long shadows across the yard. Rowan didn't press her for details about the wedding or her family, instead telling her about his plans for the cabin and his dreams of expanding his land. "My dad built everything from nothing," he explained. "When he got sick, the medical bills took it all. I promised him I'd get it back someday." "That's why you work so many jobs?" He nodded. "Every penny gets me closer." Delaney thought about her own family's wealth, accumulated over generations. She'd never had to work for anything. It had all been handed to her, along with the expectations. That came with it. After dinner, they moved to the porch. Rowan handed her a cup of coffee, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I was supposed to marry a man I don't love," Delaney said suddenly. "It was all arranged, our families, our businesses. It was a merger, not a marriage." Rowan didn't seem surprised. "And that's why you ran?" She nodded. "My brother James always told me to choose love. Before he died, that was the last thing he made me promise, and I almost broke that promise today." "Your brother sounds like a smart man." "He was the best of us," she said softly. "After he died, something in my family changed. My father became obsessed with securing the family legacy, and I became the way to do that." They fell silent again. In the distance, a coyote howled. "What will you do now?" Rowan asked. Delaney sighed. "I don't know. I can't go back, not yet anyway. But I don't have anywhere else to go. Stay here," he said simply. "Until you figure it out." She looked at him, surprised by the offer. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Rowan shrugged. "Everyone deserves a chance to breathe." He stood up, stretching. "I'm turning in. Big day tomorrow, got a fence to mend for the Johnsons." He paused at the door. "Night, Delaney." "Good night, Rowan." Alone on the porch, Delaney watched the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt free. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight, she would simply breathe. Just as Rowan had suggested. Inside the spare room, she found her phone and turned it on briefly. 27 missed calls, 42 text messages. She scrolled through them quickly. Her mother, Blake, various relatives and friends, all demanding to know where she was, what she was thinking, how she could do this to them. The last message was from her mother. "Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Come home now and we'll fix this before it gets worse. Fix this." Like she was a problem to be solved, not a person with feelings and desires of her own. Delaney turned the phone off again and set it on the dresser. Then she climbed into bed, pulling the patchwork quilt around her shoulders. In the quiet of the night, with only the sounds of crickets and the occasional distant lowing of cattle, she made a decision. For once in her life, she would choose herself. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. With that thought, Delaney closed her eyes and slept better than she had in years. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains of the spare bedroom, waking Delaney from the deepest sleep she'd had in months. For a moment, she was disoriented, expecting to see her bedroom at Ford Acres. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. The wedding, her escape, the kind stranger who had taken her in. She sat up, running a hand through her tangled hair. In the distance, she could hear movement in the kitchen. The smell of coffee filled the small cabin. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Rowan at the stove, scrambling eggs. "Morning," he said, glancing up. "Hope you're hungry." Delaney nodded, suddenly aware of how rumpled she looked. "I could help with breakfast," she offered. "Already done," Rowan replied, sliding eggs onto 2 plates. "Coffee's fresh." They ate in comfortable silence until Rowan stood up, grabbing his hat from a hook by the door. "I've got to head out. Fence work won't do itself." "Can I come with you?" Delaney asked, surprising herself with the request. Rowan raised an eyebrow. "It's hard work. Not exactly what you're used to." "I want to help," she insisted. "I can't just sit here all day." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "All right, but wear something practical." He gestured to her borrowed clothes. "There's some work boots in the closet. Might be big, but better than nothing." 30 minutes later, they were bouncing down dirt roads in Rowan's truck. Delaney had pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail and found an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt in the dresser. The boots were indeed too large, but she'd stuffed the toes with socks. "Who owns the land we're working on?" she asked. "The Johnsons, good people. Small cattle operation, nothing like your family's setup." When they arrived, Delaney got her first look at a working ranch that wasn't operating on the scale of Ford Acres. The farmhouse was modest, the barn weathered but well-maintained. An older man waved from the porch. "That's Bill Johnson," Rowan explained. "His wife, Martha, makes the best apple pie in the county." As they approached, Bill's expression changed from welcoming to shocked when he recognized Delaney. "Well, I'll be," he said, his eyes widening. "You're the Ford girl, the one from the news." Delaney froze. "The news?" Bill nodded. "It's all over. Ford heiress leaves groom at the altar. Your picture's on every local channel." Her stomach dropped. Of course it would make the news. The Fords and Millers were like local royalty. "Mr. Johnson," Rowan cut in, "Delaney's helping me with the fence today." Bill seemed to recover from his surprise. "Well, any friend of Rowan's is welcome here. But girl, your mama's on TV offering a reward for information about your whereabouts." Delaney felt the blood drain from her face. A reward, like she was a lost pet. "Don't worry," Bill added quickly. "Your secret's safe with us." Never did like the way those big families throw their weight around. Relieved but still shaken, Delaney followed Rowan to the broken section of fence. For the next several hours, she worked alongside him, holding posts while he secured them, handing him tools and learning the basics of fence repair. By midday, her hands were blistered, her back ached, and she was covered in dirt. But she felt oddly satisfied. "You're tougher than you look," Rowan commented during their water break. "Most people would have quit by now." "I'm not most people," she replied, taking a long drink from the canteen. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "No, you're certainly not." Martha Johnson brought them sandwiches at lunchtime, studying Delaney with curious but kind eyes. "You know," she said as they ate under the shade of an oak tree, "I ran away from my own wedding when I was young." Delaney looked up in surprise. "You did?" Martha nodded. "To a man my parents chose, rich fellow from Houston." She glanced at her husband with a soft smile. "Then I met Bill at a county fair 2 weeks later. Been together 43 years now. Best decision she ever made," Bill added with a wink. The simple love between them made Delaney's heart ache. This was what she wanted. Not a business arrangement, but a partnership built on real feeling. As they drove back to Rowan's cabin that evening, Delaney was exhausted but content. They stopped at a small grocery store, where Rowan bought supplies for dinner, and Delaney picked up a few essentials, including a toothbrush and some clothes that actually fit. "The clerk was staring at me," she said as they left. "Do you think she recognized me?" Rowan shrugged. "Maybe. Does it matter?" "If my family finds out where I am, they'll come for me," she explained. "And they'll make life difficult for anyone who helped me." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure you don't want to call them? Let them know you're safe at least?" Delaney thought about it. "Maybe tomorrow. I just need a little more time." Back at the cabin, Delaney insisted on cooking dinner as a thank you. As they ate the simple pasta dish she prepared, Rowan told her more about his life, growing up on the land he was now trying to buy back, losing his father to cancer, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. "What about your mother?" Delaney asked. "Left when I was 10. Decided ranch life wasn't for her." He shrugged, but Delaney could see the old pain in his eyes. "What about you? What was growing up as a Ford like?" Delaney sighed. "Lots of expectations. My father built the business into what it is today. He had big dreams for all of us. My brother James was supposed to take over, but after his accident, she trailed off. That must have been hard," Rowan said quietly. "It was. James was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. When he died, my father changed, became harder, more focused on the business than ever. And I became the vehicle for his ambitions." After dinner, they sat on the porch again, watching fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. The night was warm, the air heavy with the scent of wildflowers. "Why'd you help me yesterday?" Delaney asked suddenly. "You could have just driven past." Rowan was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. "My sister," he finally said. "She was in a bad marriage, kept saying she was going to leave but never did. By the time she finally got out, he'd broken more than her spirit." He looked at Delaney, his eyes serious. "When I saw you on that road, looking like you'd rather die than go back, I couldn't just drive by." The simple honesty of his words touched something deep inside her. "Is your sister okay now?" "She's getting there. Lives up in Oklahoma with her kids." He smiled slightly. "She's tough like you." The comparison pleased her more than it should have. The next morning, Delaney woke to the sound of hammering. She found Rowan on the porch, fixing a loose board. "Morning," he called. "There's coffee in the pot." As she poured herself a cup, Delaney noticed her phone on the counter where she'd left it. Taking a deep breath, she turned it on. The flood of notifications was immediate. More calls, more texts, more demands to know where she was. But one message caught her eye. It was from her mother's assistant. "Your mother is threatening to cut off your trust fund if you don't return by the end of the week. Board meeting scheduled for Friday to discuss your role in the company." The threat didn't surprise her, but it still stung. Money had always been her family's way of controlling her. Rowan came inside, wiping his hands on a rag. "Everything okay?" Delaney showed him the message. "They're going to cut me off," he frowned. "Would that be so bad?" "I've never lived without money," she admitted. "I wouldn't know where to start." "Most people manage just fine," he pointed out. But his tone was gentle. "What do you want to do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What did she want? "I need to face them eventually," she said slowly. "But not yet. I'm just starting to figure out who I am without them telling me." Rowan nodded. "So you stay here until you're ready." It wasn't a question, but a simple statement of fact. His unwavering support touched her deeply. Later that day, as Rowan worked on repairs around the cabin, Delaney explored the property. Behind the cabin was a small, neglected garden plot. The soil looked rich, and she found herself imagining what could grow there. When Rowan found her kneeling in the dirt, examining the soil, he looked amused. "Planning on staying long enough to see something grow?" She smiled. "Maybe. Would that be okay?" "It's your call," he said. "The garden's been empty since my dad died. Could use some attention." That afternoon, they drove into town to buy seeds and garden tools. Delaney wore a baseball cap pulled low over her eyes, but she still felt exposed. "Relax," Rowan told her as they entered the small garden center. You look like a normal person now, not a runaway bride. She tried to take his advice, but as they stood in line to pay, she noticed a woman staring at her, then whispering to her companion. Delaney's heart raced. "Rowan," she whispered urgently. "That woman recognizes me." He glanced over casually. "Let's go," he said, abandoning their place in line and guiding her back to the truck. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Delaney spotted the woman on her phone, looking in their direction. "They're going to know where I am now," she said, panic rising in her chest. "We'll deal with it if it happens," Rowan replied calmly. "For now, let's get you home." Home. The words sent an unexpected warmth through her. In just 2 days, she'd started thinking of Rowan's cabin as home. Back at the cabin, Delaney tried to shake off her worry by starting work on the garden. She cleared weeds and turned the soil, finding a strange peace in the physical labor. Rowan worked nearby, repairing a section of the roof. As the sun began to set, they sat on the porch with cold drinks, admiring their day's work. "You know," Rowan said, "I've been meaning to ask, what did you do before, at Ford Acres, I mean?" Delaney sighed. "Officially, I was the public relations director. Unofficially, I was my father's showpiece. The perfect daughter at charity events, board meetings, wherever I could make the family look good." "Did you like it?" She considered the question. "Parts of it. I have a degree in agricultural business. I wanted to implement some new sustainable farming practices, but my father was old school. He humored me, but nothing ever changed." "And your fiancé? Was he old school too? Blake?" "He was whatever was most convenient at the time." She shook her head. "Our families have been trying to merge for years. The wedding was just the final step." Rowan was quiet for a moment. "You deserve better than being someone's business deal." The simple statement, spoken without any attempt to charm or impress, touched her deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. That night, Delaney had trouble sleeping. Her thoughts kept returning to the woman at the garden center. Would she call the number from the news? Would Eleanor Ford's private investigators show up at Rowan's door tomorrow? She got up and walked quietly to the kitchen for a glass of water. Through the window, she could see the moon illuminating the fields surrounding the cabin. It was so peaceful here, so different from the constant activity and demands of Ford Acres. A floorboard creaked behind her, and she turned to find Rowan standing in the hallway, his hair tousled from sleep. "Sorry," she said. "Did I wake you?" He shook his head. "Couldn't sleep." He moved to the sink and filled his own glass. "Worried about tomorrow?" "A little," she admitted. "If they find me—" "They won't drag you away if you don't want to go," he said firmly. "It's your life, Delaney." The conviction in his voice gave her strength. "It is, isn't it? That's what I'm learning out here." They stood in comfortable silence, drinking their water and looking out at the moonlit landscape. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "Why are you alone? You're kind, hard-working, good-looking." She blushed, grateful for the darkness that hid her face. "Why isn't there someone in your life?" Rowan set his glass down slowly. "There was, once, Lisa. We were together 3 years. What happened? She wanted more than I could give. A bigger house, fancier car, more money." He shrugged. "I told her my dream was to buy back my family's land. She said dreams don't pay bills." "I'm sorry," Delaney said quietly. "Don't be. She taught me something important." He looked at her directly. "Some people love you for what you can give them. Others love you for who you are. The trick is knowing the difference." Their eyes met in the dim light, and something shifted between them, a recognition, an understanding. For a moment, Delaney thought he might move closer, but instead he stepped back. "Get some sleep," he said gently. "Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll handle it." The next morning, Delaney was up early, working in the garden. The physical labor helped calm her nerves. Around mid-morning, she heard a car approaching. Not Rowan's truck, but a sleek black SUV that screamed money and Ford Acres. Her heart sank as the vehicle pulled up to the cabin. Rowan, who had been chopping wood nearby, set down his axe and moved to stand beside her. The silent show of support gave her courage. The driver's door opened, and Eleanor Ford stepped out. her expensive shoes looking absurdly out of place on the dusty ground. Her face was a mask of controlled anger. "Delaney," she said tightly, "it's time to come home." Delaney took a deep breath. "Hello, Mother." Eleanor's gaze shifted to Rowan, her expression turning disdainful. "And you must be the man who's been harboring my daughter." She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. "Name your price." "Mother," Delaney exclaimed, horrified. Rowan's face hardened. "Ma'am, with all due respect, your daughter isn't for sale, and neither am I." Eleanor's perfectly manicured eyebrows rose. "Everyone has a price, young man." "Not everyone," Rowan replied evenly. Eleanor turned her attention back to Delaney. "You've made your point, dear. You've embarrassed the family, humiliated the Millers, and caused quite enough drama. The board meeting is tomorrow. If you're not there, your trust fund will be frozen and your position in the company terminated." The ultimatum hung in the air. A week ago, the threat would have terrified Delaney. Now standing beside Rowan with dirt under her fingernails and the beginnings of a garden behind her, she found she cared less than she expected. "Is that all?" she asked calmly. Eleanor's composure slipped for a moment, surprise flickering across her face. "Delaney, be reasonable. What are you going to do? Live in this—" She gestured dismissively at the cabin. "Shack? Work as a farmhand?" "If that's what I choose, yes." "Your father would be ashamed," Eleanor said, her voice cold. The words were meant to hurt, and they did. But Delaney stood her ground. "My father wanted me to be happy, so did James." At the mention of her son, Eleanor flinched slightly. "Don't bring your brother into this." "Why not?" "He always told me to choose love, not duty." "And is that what this is?" Eleanor asked, looking between Delaney and Rowan. "Love?" Delaney felt heat rise to her cheeks. "This is me finding out who I am without the Ford name telling me what to be." Eleanor shook her head. "You have responsibilities, Delaney, to the family, to the business." "I know, and I'll face them when I'm ready." Mother and daughter stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Eleanor sighed. "Fine, take your little vacation, but don't expect things to be the same when you decide to come back." She turned and walked back to the SUV, her posture rigid with disapproval. As the vehicle disappeared down the dirt road, Delaney felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, guilt, and a surprising sense of pride. Rowan touched her arm lightly. "You okay?" She nodded. "I think so. I've never stood up to her like that before." "You did good," he said simply. The praise, straightforward and honest, meant more to her than all the compliments she'd received at charity galas and business meetings combined. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Delaney felt a new resolve forming within her. She wasn't just hiding out here. She was finding herself. The woman who had walked through life following others' expectations was beginning to fade, replaced by someone stronger, someone with her own dreams. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for not taking her money." Rowan looked surprised. "I wouldn't do that. Most people would have." She hesitated, then added, "Most men I've known would have." "Then you've known the wrong men," he said quietly. Their eyes met, and this time the connection between them was unmistakable. Delaney felt her heart speed up as Rowan slowly leaned toward her. Their lips met in a gentle kiss, tentative at first, then deepening as she responded. When they finally pulled apart, Rowan tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering on her cheek. "I've wanted to do that since I saw you in your bare feet, planting tomatoes," he admitted with a small smile. Delaney laughed softly. "Not when you saw me in my wedding dress in the middle of the road." "Nah, you were too much of a mess then." She playfully swatted his arm and he caught her hand, holding it in his. The simple contact felt more intimate than any touch she'd shared with Blake. As night fell around them, they talked about everything and nothing: hopes, fears, favorite foods, childhood memories. It was the most honest conversation Delaney had ever had with another person. Later, as she lay in bed in the spare room, she could still feel the warmth of Rowan's lips on hers, the strength of his hand holding hers. For the first time in her Life, she was falling for someone not because of what they could offer her family, but because of who they were. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. Tomorrow, the board would meet. Her trust fund would likely be frozen. Her life as she had known it would change fundamentally, and somehow wrapped in the patchwork quilt in Rowan's spare room, with the memory of his kiss still fresh, Delaney found she didn't mind at all. The next morning, Delaney woke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window. For a moment she lay still, remembering Rowan's kiss from the night before. A smile spread across her face before reality set in. Today was the board meeting at Ford Enterprises. Today her family would likely cut her off. She got up and dressed, in the simple clothes she'd bought, then made her way to the kitchen. Rowan was already there, cooking breakfast. "Morning," he said, his eyes warming when he saw her. "Sleep okay?" "Better than I should have, considering," she replied, pouring herself coffee. He set a plate of eggs and toast in front of her. "Big day? Yeah?" She pushed the food around her plate. "The board meeting is at 10. By noon I'll probably be officially disowned." Rowan sat across from her. "Does that scare you?" She considered the question seriously. "Not as much as it should. What scares me is not knowing who I am without the Ford name attached to me." "You're Delaney," he said simply. "The woman who works in the garden until her hands blister, who laughs at my bad jokes, who kisses like she means it." Heat rose to her cheeks at the last part. "Is that enough?" "It is for me." The quiet certainty in his voice gave her strength. They finished breakfast, then Rowan headed out to check on a neighbor's sick horse. Before leaving, he kissed her softly. "Whatever happens today, you've got a place here," he said. Alone in the cabin, Delaney felt restless. She checked her phone. No new messages since her mother's visit. The silence was more ominous than a flood of texts would have been. She walked out to the garden she'd started, feeling a connection to the small seedlings that were just beginning to push through the soil. Like them, she was finding her own way toward the light. Around noon, her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. With a sense of dread, she answered. Delaney Ford. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Ms. Ford, this is Martin Green from Texas Banking Trust. I'm calling regarding your accounts." Her stomach dropped. "Yes?" "I regret to inform you that access to your trust fund has been temporarily suspended, pending review by the trustees. Additionally, your company credit cards have been deactivated." She had expected it, but the reality still stung. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." After hanging up, she stared at the phone in her hand. Just like that, her financial safety net was gone. The trust fund that had supported her lifestyle, the credit cards she'd used without thinking, all gone with a simple phone call. She walked back into the cabin and looked around the simple space that had become her refuge. Rowan lived without wealth, without the Ford name, without family connections opening doors. If he could do it, so could she. When Rowan returned that afternoon, she told him about the call. "So they did it," he said, his expression concerned. "How are you feeling?" "Strangely okay," she admitted, "but I can't stay here indefinitely, living off your kindness. I need to find a job." Rowan nodded. "What can you do?" "Besides PR for a multi-million-dollar agricultural company?" She laughed despite herself. "I have a degree in agricultural business. I can ride a horse, organize an event, charm investors." She paused. "Nothing very practical, I guess." "Don't sell yourself short. You learned fence repair in a day." His eyes lit up suddenly. "Actually, Martha Johnson mentioned yesterday that the Rust Creek Farmers Market needs a new manager. The previous one moved to Dallas last month." "A farmers market manager?" The idea appealed to her immediately. "Do you think they'd hire me?" "Worth asking." "Markets run by a committee of local growers. They meet at the diner in town tonight." By evening, Delaney had prepared a simple resume, focusing on her organizational skills and agricultural knowledge, rather than her family connections. Rowan drove her to the Rust Creek Diner, where 5 local farmers sat in a corner booth. "Evening, Rowan," called a gray-haired woman. "This must be your friend we've been hearing about." Delaney felt a flutter of nervousness. Of course they'd heard about her. The runaway Ford heiress was probably the biggest gossip in the county. "This is Delaney," Rowan said. "She's interested in the market manager position." The committee members introduced themselves: Sarah Miller, who grew organic vegetables; Tom Wilson, a honey producer; Margaret and David Chen, who raised free-range chickens; and Joe Hansen, who made artisanal cheeses. "So," Sarah said, studying Delaney, "why do you want to manage our little market?" Delaney took a deep breath. "I have experience in agricultural business and event planning. I understand the challenges small producers face in getting fair prices and market exposure. And honestly, I'm looking to build a life based on what I can contribute, not who my family is." The committee exchanged glances. Joe spoke first. "The job doesn't pay much. 20 hours a week, mostly weekends." "That's fine," Delaney assured them. "I'm not looking for wealth, I'm looking for purpose." "And what happens when you decide to go back to your real life?" Margaret asked bluntly. Delaney met her gaze. "This is my real life now, the one I'm choosing for myself." After more questions about her experience and ideas for the market, the committee asked her to step outside while they discussed. She joined Rowan at the counter, where he was nursing a cup of coffee. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I'm not sure. They're skeptical about my commitment." "Understandable. You've been here less than a week." She nodded, anxiety building as the minutes ticked by. Finally, Sarah came to get her. "We've decided to give you a chance," she said. 3-month trial period. You start this Saturday." Relief and excitement flooded through her. "Thank you, you won't regret it." As they drove back to the cabin, Delaney couldn't stop smiling. "I got a job," she said, the words still feeling surreal. "A real job that has nothing to do with my last name." Rowan grinned. "Proud of you." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "We should celebrate." Back at the cabin, he opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving, and they sat on the porch under the stars, glasses in hand. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," she echoed, clinking her glass against his. As they drank, Delaney felt a contentment she'd never experienced before. The future was uncertain. She had no money, no safety net, just a part-time job at a small farmer's market, and yet she felt more secure than she ever had at Ford Acres. Rowan set his glass down and turned to face her. "There's something I need to say." The seriousness in his tone made her heart skip. "What is it?" "This thing between us. It's happening fast. And I don't want you to think I'm offering you a place to stay because I expect anything in return. I know that," she said softly. "Do you? Because I've seen how men look at you, Delaney, like you're something to be won, to be claimed. And I never want to be that guy." She reached out, touching his face gently. "You're not. You're the first man who's ever seen me, really seen me. Not as a Ford, but as just Delaney." He turned, his face to kiss her palm, and the simple gesture sent warmth through her entire body. "I'm falling for you," he admitted quietly, "and it scares the hell out of me." "Why?" "Because people like you don't end up with people like me. Not in the real world." Delaney moved closer, meeting his eyes. "Maybe it's time to rewrite the rules of the real world." When he kissed her this time, there was a hunger there that hadn't been present before. She responded in kind, her hands finding their way into his hair, pulling him closer. Later, lying in his bed with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Delaney felt like she'd finally found her place in the world. Not as a Ford, not as anyone's daughter or sister or fiancée, but as herself, a woman capable of making her own choices, following her own heart. "Rowan?" she whispered. His fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Thank you for stopping that day, for picking up a stranger in a wedding dress." He chuckled, the sound rumbling under her ear. "Best decision I ever made." The next morning, Delaney woke early, filled with energy and purpose. She made breakfast while Rowan showered, then they drove into town together. He dropped her at the farmer's market site, an empty lot during the week, transformed into a bustling marketplace every Saturday. Sarah was waiting with keys and a thick binder of information. "This is everything you need to know," she explained. "Vendor contracts, layout maps, health department permits." Delaney spent the morning absorbing as much information as she could, making notes and asking questions. By lunchtime, her head was spinning, but she felt confident she could handle the job. When Rowan picked her up, she was bursting with ideas. "The market needs a website," she told him excitedly, "and social media accounts. We could attract tourists from Austin and San Antonio with the right marketing." He smiled at her enthusiasm. "Sounds like you found your calling." "Maybe I have," she admitted. "It feels good to use my skills for something real, something that helps local farmers instead of just making rich corporations richer." As they pulled into a gas station, Delaney noticed a familiar car parked near the convenience store. Blake Miller's sleek silver Mercedes. "Rowan," she said, her voice tight. "That's Blake's car." Rowan followed her gaze. "Your ex-fiancé?" She nodded, sinking lower in her seat. "I don't want to see him." But it was too late. Blake emerged from the store, his tall figure unmistakable in an expensive suit that looked ridiculously out of place in Rust Creek. His eyes locked on Rowan's truck, and his expression hardened when he spotted Delaney. "Stay here," Rowan said, his jaw tensing as he got out of the truck. "No," Delaney protested, following him. "This is my mess. I'll handle it." Blake approached, his handsome face a mask of controlled anger. Well, the runaway bride herself." "Hello, Blake," Delaney said, keeping her voice steady. His eyes flicked to Rowan, then back to her. "So this is why you left? Trading a Miller? What exactly is this?" He gestured dismissively at Rowan. "This," Rowan said evenly, "is a man asking you to watch your tone when speaking to the lady." Blake laughed coldly. "Lady? Is that what you call a woman who leaves her fiancé at the altar and shacks up with the first cowboy she meets?" Delaney felt her cheeks burn with anger. "We were never in love, Blake. It was a business arrangement, and you know it." "It was an agreement," he snapped. "One that cost my family a lot when you decided to play drama queen." Rowan stepped forward, but Delaney put a hand on his arm. "It's not worth it," she said quietly. Blake's eyes narrowed. "Your mother seems to think you're having some kind of breakdown. Personally, I think you're just selfish. Always have been." "Think whatever you want," Delaney replied, surprising herself with her calmness. "I'm done living my life to please other people." "You're done living like a Ford, you mean?" Blake said. "How's that working out for you? Heard they froze your accounts. Bet that was a reality check." The reality check was realizing there's more to life than money and status. She looked at him directly. "I'm sorry for how I left. You deserved better than that. But I'm not sorry for choosing my own path." Blake seemed taken aback by her apology. For a moment his mask slipped, and she caught a glimpse of genuine hurt beneath the anger. "Your father would be disappointed," he said finally, his voice softer but still cutting. The words stung as they were meant to. "Maybe," she acknowledged, "but I think my brother would be proud." At the mention of James, something changed in Blake's expression. He and James had been friends once before the accident. "You always were his favorite," Blake said, a strange mix of resentment and respect in his voice. "Guess the stubborn streak runs in the family." Without another word, he walked back to his Mercedes and drove away, leaving Delaney shaking slightly. From the confrontation, Rowan put an arm around her shoulders. "You okay?" She nodded. "Better than I expected, actually. I needed to face him eventually." "You handled it well, did I?" She wasn't sure. "I hurt him, Rowan. Not because he loved me, but because I damaged his pride." "That's on him, not you." They drove back to the cabin in thoughtful silence. The encounter with Blake had brought the outside world crashing back into the peaceful bubble they'd created. It was a reminder that her past wasn't so easily left behind. That night, unable to sleep, Delaney found an old photo of James in her wallet. She took it out to the barn, where Rowan kept a few horses he cared for as side work. In the quiet darkness, surrounded by the gentle sounds of animals, she looked at her brother's smiling face. "I'm trying to keep my promise, Jamie," she whispered. "Choosing love, not duty. I hope you can see that." She didn't hear Rowan approach until he draped a blanket around her shoulders. "Thought you might be cold," he said, sitting beside her on a hay bale. She showed him the photo. "This was taken 6 months before his accident. We were at the ranch in Colorado." Rowan studied the image. "He has your smile." "He was the best of us," she said softly. "Kind, funny, smart. He never cared about the Ford legacy the way my father did. He just wanted to live a good life, be a good person. Sounds like someone else I know, Rowan said, squeezing her hand. A tear slipped down her cheek. I miss him so much. After he died, everything changed. My father became obsessed with the business, with securing the future, and I became a pawn in that plan. Rowan wrapped the blanket more securely around her, his presence a solid comfort in the darkness. He didn't offer empty words or platitudes, just sat with her in her grief, letting her feel it fully. It meant everything. The next day was Saturday, her first day managing the farmer's market. Delaney woke before dawn, nervous energy propelling her out of bed. She dressed carefully in jeans and a simple blouse, pulling her hair back in a practical ponytail. "Ready for your big day?" Rowan asked as they ate a quick breakfast. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, checking her notes one last time. The market site was already bustling when they arrived. Vendors were setting up booths, unloading produce, and crafts arranging their displays. Delaney took a deep breath and jumped into action, clipboard in hand. "Sarah, you're in space 12, not 14, she directed, pointing to the correct spot. "Tom, the health inspector needs to see your new honey. Labels before you can sell them." Rowan watched with pride as she moved confidently among the vendors, solving problems, answering questions, making everyone feel heard. This was a side of her he hadn't seen before, capable, authoritative, but also warm and approachable. By the time the market opened to customers at 9, everything was running smoothly. Delaney stood at the entrance, welcoming visitors and handing out maps of the vendors. The locals eyed her curiously. Most recognized her from the news or gossip, but her friendly demeanor and obvious competence won many of them over. Around midday, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd, her cousin Melissa, who had been a bridesmaid at the almost wedding. Delaney tensed, wondering if this was another family attempt to bring her back to the fold. "Delaney," Melissa said, approaching, with a hesitant smile, "I heard you were working here." "Melissa, did my mother send you?" Her cousin shook her head. "No one knows I'm here. I just wanted to see if you were okay." The genuine concern in her voice made Delaney relax slightly. "I'm more than okay. I'm happy." Melissa looked around, at the modest market, then back at Delaney with obvious confusion. "Here, managing a farmer's market? Hard to believe, isn't it?" Delaney smiled. "Turns out there's life beyond 4 acres. Your mother is furious," Melissa said in a low voice. "The board voted to remove you from your position in the company, and the trust fund freeze isn't temporary, it's permanent unless you come back and make amends." The news should have devastated her, but Delaney found she cared less than expected. "I figured as much. Aren't you worried about money? About your future?" Delaney glanced across the market to where Rowan was helping an elderly vendor unload boxes of produce. "I'm building a different kind of future now." Following her gaze, Melissa's eyes widened. "Oh my God, you're in love with him, the cowboy from the gossip." "His name is Rowan," Delaney said firmly, "and yes, I think I am." Melissa grabbed her arm. "Laney, be serious. He's nobody. No money, no connections, no future. What can he possibly offer you?" "Respect, kindness, the space to find out who I really am." Delaney gently removed her cousin's hand. "Things I never had with Blake, or at 4 acres. This is insane. You're throwing away everything for some romantic fantasy." "No," Delaney replied calmly. "I'm choosing a life that feels real to me. For the first time ever." Melissa stared at her, clearly at a loss for words. Finally, she sighed. "Your mother wants me to tell you that the door is still open. If you come back, apologize to the Millers, and agree to take the position they've created for you in the Houston office." "Houston?" Delaney frowned. "They want to ship me off to a branch office." Out of sight, out of mind, at least until the scandal dies down. The realization hit Delaney hard. They didn't want her back because they loved her or missed her. They wanted her back to control the narrative, to minimize the damage to the Ford name. "Tell my mother thank you, but no," she said firmly. "I'm staying in Rust Creek." "She said you'd say that." Melissa reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "She told me to give you this if you refused." Delaney took the envelope warily. Inside was a check, Not the millions her trust fund held, but enough to buy a small house or start a modest business. What is this? A settlement, I guess. Enough that you can't claim they left you destitute. Not enough that you can live the life you're used to. Melissa shrugged. It comes with conditions, of course. You can't use the Ford name in any business ventures, and you have to sign an agreement not to speak publicly about the family. Delaney stared at the check, conflicting emotions washing over her. It was both a peace offering and a final severance, a way to cut her loose while maintaining control. I need to think about this, she said finally, tucking the envelope into her pocket. Melissa nodded. Just don't wait too long. The offer expires in a week. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I think you look happy. Happier than I've seen you in years. After Melissa left, Delaney continued her duties at the market, but her mind kept returning to the check in her pocket and all it represented. By the end of the day, as vendors packed up and counted their earnings, she was mentally and emotionally exhausted. Successful first day, Sarah commented, helping Delaney collect the rental fees from vendors. You're a natural at this. Thanks, Delaney replied, managing a tired smile. I enjoyed it more than I expected. Rowan found her sitting on a bench after everyone had left, staring at the empty lot that would transform into a vibrant marketplace. Again next weekend. You were amazing today, he said, sitting beside her. Everyone was talking about the new manager. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. My cousin Melissa showed up. I saw. What did she want? Delaney pulled out the envelope. To deliver this. It's a check from my mother. A settlement of sorts. Enough to start over, but with strings attached. Rowan was quiet for a moment. Are you going to take it? I don't know. She looked at him uncertainly. What do you think I should do? It's not for me to say, Delaney. It's your family, your money. But it affects you too, she insisted. Us. He considered this. How so? With this money I could get my own place, start a small business maybe. I wouldn't have to depend on you or live in your spare room. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Is that what you think? That I see you as a burden? No, but let me make something clear, he said, taking her hands in his. I want you in my home, not as a guest, not as someone passing through, but as, he hesitated, as part of my life. The words sent a wave of warmth through her. Are you asking me to move in? Officially? I'm asking you to build a life with me. His eyes held hers, serious and certain. Whether you take that check or not, whether you're a Ford or just Delaney, I want you, all of you. In that moment, sitting on a bench in an empty lot as the sun began to set, Delaney knew with absolute clarity what she wanted. She took the check from the envelope and slowly, deliberately tore it in half. I don't need their money, she said. I don't need their name. I just need this, you, me, a chance to create something real together. Rowan's smile was like the sunrise, slow, warm, and full of promise. He pulled her close and kissed her, right, there in the open, not caring who might see. That night back at the cabin that was now truly becoming their home, Delaney called her mother. The conversation was brief and tense. I'm not taking the settlement, she said firmly, and I'm not coming back to Ford Enterprises. Then you're no longer a Ford, Eleanor replied, her voice cold. I hope this cowboy of yours is worth throwing away your birthright. He is, Delaney said simply, but that's not why I'm staying. I'm staying because for the first time in my life, I'm becoming the person I want to be, not the person everyone else expects. After hanging up, she joined Rowan on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. It's done, she told him. I'm officially disowned. He put his arm around her. How do you feel? She considered the question. Lighter, like I've set down a weight I've been carrying my whole life. She looked up at him. A little scared too. That's natural. Change is always scary. He kissed the top of her head. But you're not alone in this. No, she agreed, nestling closer to him. I'm not alone anymore. As they sat together under the vast Texas sky, Delaney felt a peace she had never known before. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges, doubts, hard days ahead, but she would face them on her own terms, with Rowan by her side. For a woman who had spent her entire life following a predetermined path, the open road ahead was both terrifying and exhilarating. But one thing was certain. Whatever came next, it would be her choice, her life, her love, and that made all the difference. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Delaney's life. Each Saturday she managed the farmers' market, gradually implementing changes that increased attendance and vendor sales. She started a social media page that attracted tourists from nearby cities and worked with local restaurants to feature produce from market vendors on their menus. "You've brought new life to this place," Sarah told her one Saturday as they counted record-breaking receipts. "The market hasn't been this busy in years." Delaney beamed with pride. This success was hers alone, earned through hard work and creativity, not because of her last name. At home, she and Rowan settled into a comfortable routine. She tended her growing garden in the mornings, worked on market business in the afternoons, and spent evenings with Rowan on the porch, talking about their days and planning for the future. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, Rowan brought up something that had been on his mind. "I got a call from Bill Johnson today," he said. "The pasture next to his property is up for sale." "The one with the creek running through it?" Delaney asked. She knew how much Rowan loved that land, with its rich soil and natural water source. He nodded. "It's part of what used to be my family's property. The price is fair, but you don't have enough saved yet," she finished for him. "I'm close. Another 6 months of good work. I might make it." He sighed. "But these opportunities don't come around often." Delaney squeezed his hand. "We'll figure something out." The next day, while Rowan was working, Delaney drove into town to talk to the bank. Without her trust fund or family connections, she knew getting a loan would be difficult, but she had to try. The loan officer, a middle-aged man named Greg Peterson, recognized her immediately. "Ms. Ford," he said, looking uncomfortable, "what can I do for you?" She explained about the land, about Rowan's dream to buy back his family's property, and her desire to help make that happen. Greg looked sympathetic but shook his head. "I'm sorry, but without collateral or a steady income history, I can't approve a loan of that size." "I understand," she said, disappointed but not surprised. "Thank you for your time." As she turned to leave, Greg called after her. "Miss Ford? For what it's worth, I think what you're doing. Making your own way, it takes courage." The comment surprised her. "Thank you," she said, genuinely touched. Back at the cabin, Delaney tried to push aside her disappointment and focus on what they did have each other, a roof over their heads and work they enjoyed. But when Rowan mentioned the land again that evening, the sadness in his eyes was hard to bear. "It's just land," he said, trying to sound casual. "There will be other opportunities." But they both knew it wasn't just land. It was his heritage, his father's dream, a piece of his heart. The next day, Delaney made a difficult decision. She called Melissa. "I need to ask you something," she said when her cousin answered. "It's important." They met at a coffee shop halfway between Rust Creek and Ford Acres. Melissa looked elegant as always, making Delaney suddenly conscious of her simple clothes and sun-browned skin. "You look different," Melissa said, studying her. "Healthier, somehow." "I am healthier," Delaney replied. "Happier too." After ordering coffee, Delaney got straight to the point. "I need to know about James's will. What happened to his personal assets after he died?" Melissa looked surprised by the question. "Why are you asking now after all this time?" "Please, Melissa, it's important," her cousin sighed. "Most of it went to charity, I think. He had some investments, a condo in Austin. I don't know all the details." "Who would? His lawyer?" "Probably. Martin Reynolds handled his estate." Melissa narrowed her eyes. "What's this about, Laney?" Delaney explained about the land, about Rowan's connection to it, and her frustration at not being able to help him secure it. "So you're thinking of using your brother's money to buy land for your cowboy?" Melissa asked, her tone skeptical. "It's not like that," Delaney insisted. "James always supported me making my own choices. I think he'd want to help if he could." Melissa seemed unconvinced, but wrote down the lawyer's contact information anyway. "Don't get your hopes up," she warned. "Uncle Robert made sure most of the family money stayed in the business after James died." Armed with the lawyer's number, Delaney made an appointment for the following day. Martin Reynolds had a small office. in Austin, a 2-hour drive from Rust Creek. She told Rowan she was meeting with market vendors in the city, not wanting to raise his hopes. The lawyer remembered her, of course. "Ms. Ford," he said warmly. "It's been too long. Your brother was very fond of you." "Thank you," she said, emotion tightening her throat at the mention of James. "I'm here about his estate." Reynolds opened a file on his desk. "What would you like to know? Did he own any property around Rust Creek Hollow, specifically land that might have once belonged to the Tate family?" The lawyer's eyebrows rose slightly. "As a matter of fact, he did. A parcel of about 60 acres with a creek running through it. He purchased it about a year before his death." Delaney's heart raced. "What happened to it after he died?" "It's held in trust," Reynolds explained. "Your brother left unusual instructions for that particular property." "What kind of instructions?" Reynolds read from a document. "The Rust Creek property is to be held in trust until such time as a worthy steward comes forward, someone who will know how to love the land right." He looked up. "There was a note attached, instructing me to look for someone named Tate." Delaney gasped. "Rowan Tate?" He specified Rowan Tate. "Not my first name, just the Tate family. Apparently they were the original owners." Reynolds studied her curiously. "Do you know this family?" "Yes," she whispered, her mind racing. "Yes, I do." Reynolds continued. "The trust has a provision that if a suitable Tate cannot be found within 10 years of James's death, the land goes to a conservation organization. And it's been 5 years, Delaney said, more to herself than to the lawyer. "Correct. May I ask why this suddenly interests you?" Delaney explained about Rowan, about his dream to reclaim his family land, and the current opportunity to buy the adjoining parcel. "Miss Ford," Reynolds said when she finished, "it seems the universe has a sense of poetry. Your brother purchased that land specifically to return it to the Tate family when the time was right." "But how did he even know them?" Delaney wondered. "Rowan never mentioned meeting James." Reynolds smiled slightly. "Your brother had many interests your father didn't approve of. He spent time in Rust Creek researching sustainable farming practices. Perhaps he met the Tates then." Hope building inside her, Delaney asked, "So what happens now? Can Rowan claim the land?" "There's a process. I'll need to verify his identity, ensure he meets the criteria in the trust. But yes, if all checks out, the land would be his, free and clear." Overwhelmed with emotion, Delaney could barely thank the lawyer properly before hurrying back to her car. Her brother, even from beyond the grave, was helping her follow her heart. It felt like a blessing she hadn't known she needed. Driving back to Rust Creek, Delaney wrestled with how to tell Rowan. This wasn't just about the land anymore. It was about a connection between James and Rowan she hadn't known existed, a thread that had been quietly weaving through her life even before she climbed into Rowan's truck in her wedding dress. When she arrived home, she found Rowan on the porch, his expression troubled. "Where were you really today?" he asked without preamble. "Bill Johnson saw you heading toward Austin this morning. There's no market business in Austin." Guilt washed over her. "I'm sorry I wasn't honest. I needed to check something without getting your hopes up." "Check what?" His voice was wary. Taking a deep breath, Delaney told him everything about James's will, the trust, the land that had been waiting for him all this time. Rowan listened in stunned silence. When she finished, he stood up and walked to the edge of the porch, his back to her. "Rowan," she said cautiously, "say something." "I met your brother once," he said quietly. 6 years ago. He came to Rust Creek looking at sustainable farming techniques. Stayed for 2 weeks, worked alongside local farmers, asked a lot of questions." He turned to face her. "He was different from most rich folks. Actually got his hands dirty, listened more than he talked." "That sounds like James," Delaney said softly. "We talked about the land my family lost, how I was working to buy it back piece by piece. I never thought—" He shook his head in disbelief. "I never thought he'd remember that conversation, let alone act on it." "He saw something in you worth believing in," Delaney said. "Just like I did." Rowan crossed the porch in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Thank you," he whispered against her hair, "for finding this, for telling me, for everything." When he finally released her, there were tears in his eyes. I don't know how to process this. It's like a miracle. I know, she agreed. It feels like James is watching over us somehow. That night they talked for hours, about James, about the land, about the strange ways fate had brought them together. It felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place, a sign that they were exactly where they were meant to be. The following weeks were a whirlwind of paperwork and meetings with Reynolds. As promised, the process wasn't simple, but by mid-September it was official. The 60 acres of prime farmland that had once belonged to Rowan's family was legally his again. There's more, Reynolds told them during their final meeting. The trust also includes funds for developing the land, sustainable farming equipment, irrigation systems, whatever's needed to make it productive again. Rowan was overwhelmed. I don't know how to thank you, either of you. Thank James, Delaney said, squeezing his hand. He's the one who made this possible. With the deed to the land secure, Rowan's next step was clear. Buy the adjacent parcel that was currently for sale. With the backing of James's trust, securing a loan was no longer an issue. By October, less than 3 months after Delaney had run away from her wedding, Rowan had reclaimed nearly half of his family's original property. The day they placed the Tate Farms sign at the entrance to the property, Delaney felt a sense of completion she'd never experienced before. What do you think? Rowan asked, standing back to admire the simple wooden sign he'd carved himself. It's perfect, she said, then hesitated. But there's one thing missing. What's that? My name, she said softly. Next to yours. Rowan turned to her, his expression serious. Delaney, are you saying what I think you're saying? I want to build this farm with you, not as your girlfriend, not as your partner, but as your wife. She touched his face gently. If you'll have me. Instead of answering with words, Rowan lifted her off her feet, spinning her around until she laughed. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with joy. I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small box. Inside was a simple ring with a single diamond. It's not fancy like what you're used to. It's beautiful, she interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. And I'm not used to fancy anymore. I'm used to real. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Delaney Ford, will you marry me? Not because it makes business sense, not because our families expect it, but because we choose each other, every day, for the rest of our lives? Yes, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her there, under the Texas sky, beside the sign that would soon bear both their names. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Rust Creek. The farmers, market vendors threw them a small celebration, and even the Johnsons hosted a dinner in their honor. When's the big day? Martha Johnson asked as they enjoyed apple pie on the porch. Delaney and Rowan exchanged glances. We're thinking something. Small, Delaney said. Just close friends here at the farm when the wildflowers bloom in spring. No white dresses this time, Rowan added with a grin. Delaney insists on wearing boots. Damn right I do, she laughed, feeling lighter than air. As they drove home, that evening Rowan asked the question she knew had been on his mind. Are you going to invite your family? Delaney sighed. I don't know. My mother made it pretty clear I'm not welcome at Ford Acres anymore. But this isn't Ford Acres. It's our home, our home. The words filled her with warmth. I'll think about it, she promised. The decision was made for her the following week when Melissa showed up at the farmer's market again, this time with news. Your mother's sick, she said without preamble. Cancer. They found it 3 weeks ago. Delaney felt the world tilt beneath her feet. How bad? Bad enough she's starting treatment next week. Melissa hesitated. She doesn't know I'm telling you. She forbade anyone from contacting you, but you did anyway. Melissa nodded. She's still your mother, Laney, and you're the only family she has left. That evening, Delaney told Rowan about Eleanor's illness. I have to go see her, she said. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course you do. Will you come with me, she asked, suddenly nervous at the thought of returning to Ford Acres. Are you sure that's a good idea? I'm sure I need you by my side, she said simply. The next day they drove to Ford Acres together. Delaney felt strange approaching the massive house as a visitor rather than a resident. Nothing had changed, Yet everything felt different. Melissa met them at the door. "She's in the sunroom," she said, eyeing Rowan curiously. "She doesn't know you're coming." Delaney took a deep breath and squeezed Rowan's hand. "Wait here," she told him. "Let me talk to her first." Eleanor Ford sat in a wicker chair, a blanket over her legs despite the warm day. She looked smaller, somehow frailer than Delaney remembered. Her head turned as Delaney entered, and shock registered on her face. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, but the usual steel in her voice was missing. "Melissa told me you're sick," Delaney said, moving to sit in the chair opposite her mother. "I came to see you." To gloat? To say I told you so? Delaney shook her head. "To see how you are. You're still my mother." Eleanor looked away. A mother whose daughter abandoned her. "I didn't abandon you, Mom. I chose a different path than the one you wanted for me." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of months of separation between them. "Are you happy?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice softer. "In your new life?" "Yes," Delaney answered honestly. "Happier than I've ever been." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Your father always said you had too much of James in you, too independent for your own good." "I'll take that as a compliment," Delaney said with a small smile. "He's here, isn't he? Your cowboy." "His name is Rowan," Delaney corrected gently. "And yes, he's here. We're engaged." Eleanor's lips tightened, but she didn't explode as Delaney expected. "You're determined to walk this path." "It's not about determination, Mom. It's about love. Real love, not a business arrangement." Another long silence fell between them. Then, surprisingly, Eleanor gestured toward the door. "Well, don't leave him standing in the hallway. Let me meet the man who stole my daughter." "He didn't steal me," Delaney said firmly. "He helped me find myself." She went to the door and beckoned to Rowan, who entered somewhat awkwardly, his hat in his hands. "Mrs. Ford," he said politely. "I'm sorry to hear about your illness." Eleanor studied him with critical eyes. "So you're the man my daughter threw away her inheritance for." "Mom," Delaney warned, but Rowan wasn't intimidated. "With all due respect, ma'am, your daughter didn't throw away anything. She built something new, a life she chose, work she believes in, relationships based on who she is, not what her last name can provide." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, seemingly impressed despite herself. "You're more articulate than I expected, and you're exactly as formidable as Delaney described," he replied with a hint of a smile. A ghost of amusement flickered across Eleanor's face. "Sit down, both of you. If we're going to have this conversation, we might as well be comfortable." For the next hour they talked about Eleanor's diagnosis, serious but treatable, about the farm, about the farmer's market. There were tense moments and awkward silences, but also moments of unexpected connection. "You remind me of Robert when we first met," Eleanor told Rowan at one point. "Before Ford Enterprises, before the money, he had that same directness." When they finally rose to leave, Eleanor asked to speak to Delaney alone. Rowan squeezed her hand and stepped outside. "He loves you," Eleanor said once they were alone. "That much is obvious." "Yes," Delaney agreed. "He does. And you love him." "With all my heart." Eleanor sighed deeply. "I won't pretend to understand your choices, Delaney, but I'm too old and too sick to keep fighting." It was as close to a blessing as she was likely to get. "Thank you," Delaney said softly. "When is this wedding of yours?" "Spring, when the wildflowers bloom." Eleanor nodded. "Well, assuming I survive this wretched treatment, I suppose I could attend, if I'm invited." Delaney felt tears prick her eyes. "Of course you're invited. You're my mother." Something softened in Eleanor's expression. "James would be proud of you, you know. He always said you were stronger than all of us. I miss him," Delaney whispered. "So do I." For the first time in years, Delaney saw genuine emotion in her mother's eyes. Every single day. As she and Rowan drove away from Ford Acres, Delaney felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "That went better than I expected," she admitted. "Your mother is a tough woman," Rowan observed, "but she loves you in her way. I think she might even learn to tolerate you," Delaney teased. High praise indeed. The months that followed brought more changes. Eleanor's treatment was difficult, but effective. By Christmas, she was well enough to visit Rust Creek, staying in the small guest room Rowan had added to the cabin. The visit was strained at times, but Eleanor made a genuine effort to understand her daughter's new life. "It's different than I expected," she admitted as they sat by the fireplace on Christmas Eve. Simpler, but not without its charm. Coming from Eleanor Ford, it was practically a rave review. Winter passed into spring, and the land around the cabin exploded with color. Bluebonnets, Indian paintbrush, black-eyed Susans. The date was set, invitations sent to a small group of friends and family. The night before the wedding, Delaney stood in the garden she had planted, now lush with vegetables and herbs. Rowan found her there, staring up at the stars. "Cold feet?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against his chest. "Not even slightly, you?" "Never been more sure of anything in my life." He kissed her temple. "What are you thinking about?" "James," she admitted. "Wishing he could be here tomorrow." "He will be," Rowan said softly. "In every wildflower, every breeze. In the land that's bringing us together." She turned in his arms to face him. "How did I get so lucky?" "I ask myself the same question every morning when I wake up next to you." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "From runaway bride to farmer's wife, quite a journey." "The best journey," she corrected, "because it led me to you." The wedding day dawned clear and bright. Following tradition, Rowan spent the night at the Johnsons', leaving Delaney at the cabin with Melissa, who had agreed to be her maid of honor. Last. "Chance to back out," Melissa joked as she helped Delaney with her hair. "There's still time to call Blake," Delaney laughed. "Not a chance. This time I'm exactly where I want to be." Her wedding outfit was nothing like the elaborate gown she'd worn nearly a year ago. This time, she chose a simple white sundress and, as promised, cowboy boots, the ones Rowan had given her for Christmas, with her initials tooled into the leather. The ceremony took place in the meadow between the cabin and the barn, with chairs set up facing an arch Rowan had built, now covered in wildflowers. Bill Johnson, who was also the local justice of the peace, performed the service. Eleanor sat in the front row, looking elegant despite her ongoing recovery, a tentative smile on her face. The market vendors filled several rows, along with neighbors and friends from Rust Creek. Even Blake attended with his new girlfriend, having made a strained peace with Delaney months earlier. When Rowan saw her walking toward him through the wildflowers, his face lit up with a joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. He looked handsome in his best shirt and jeans, a single blue bonnet in his lapel. "You look beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. "So do you," she replied, her heart so full she could barely speak. Bill kept the ceremony short and sweet, just as they'd requested. When it came time for vows, Rowan took both her hands in his. "Delaney," he began, his voice steady and sure, "a year ago you climbed into my truck in a wedding dress, with tears on your face and fire in your eyes. You were running away from a life that wasn't yours. Today you're walking toward a life that is completely, entirely yours, ours by choice. I promise to honor that choice every day, to love you for exactly who you are, and to build a home with you where we both can grow, dream, and belong. I choose you, Delaney, today and always." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she responded. "Rowan, you saw me when I was invisible to everyone else, even myself. You gave me space to breathe, to discover who I really am, to find my own strength. What started as an escape became the journey home, to myself, to this land, to you. I promise to love you with the same honesty and kindness you've shown me, to stand beside you through whatever comes, and to choose you, freely and joyfully, every single day for the rest of our lives." When Bill pronounced them husband and wife, Rowan kissed her with such tenderness that the small crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The reception was a simple affair, tables set up under the trees, food prepared by Martha Johnson and the other women of Rust Creek, music provided by a local band. As the afternoon stretched into evening, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the celebration. Eleanor approached them as they swayed together on the makeshift dance floor. "Congratulations," she said, her voice surprisingly warm. "It was a lovely ceremony." "Thank you for coming, Mom," Delaney said, genuinely grateful for her presence. "Yes, thank you," Rowan added. "It meant a lot to both of us." Eleanor studied them for a moment. "You know, when James died, I thought our family was breaking apart. Then when you left, Delaney, I was sure of it." She glanced around at the gathered friends, the twinkling lights, the simple beauty of the farm. "But I see now that family isn't just about carrying on a name or a business. It's about building something that matters to you." It was perhaps the closest thing to a blessing they would ever receive from her. Delaney hugged her mother, feeling the fragile bones beneath her. "Elegant dress, you'll always have a place here," she said softly. "Always." As the night grew later, Delaney and Rowan slipped away from the party to the small hill behind the cabin. From there, they could see the lights of the celebration, hear the music and laughter, but had a moment of privacy. "Happy?" Rowan asked, his arm around her waist. "Beyond words," she replied, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You?" "More than I ever thought possible." He turned to face her. "So, Mrs. Tate, what's next for us?" "Everything," she said simply. "The farm, the market, maybe someday a family of our own. Whatever it is, we'll build it together." He smiled, the moonlight catching the love in his eyes. "Together. I like the sound of that." As they walked back, down the hill toward their future, hand in hand, Delaney thought of James and his final advice to her. Choose love. Not duty, not family expectations. Love. She had kept her promise, and in doing so had found not just love but herself, the woman she was always meant to be. The lights of home beckoned ahead, warm and welcoming. Not the grand estate where she was born, but the simple cabin where she had been reborn, as herself on her own terms, with the man who had seen her value from the very beginning. Sometimes, Delaney thought, running away was actually running toward exactly where you belonged.